welcome to History in 60 Seconds with me, Maya.
And me, Anna.
Today we're going to be getting all historical about 4 completely random different topics that are definitely not pre-planned and scripted. Let's get into it. First topic
is women's rights!
Amazing!
And the 60 seconds begins now.
In 1848, in upstate New York, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, along with some other women, had a conversation about women's rights. 2 days after their meeting, a date was picked and the Women's Rights Convention was born. In 1869, Stanton joined up with Massachusetts teacher Susan B. Anthony to form the National Women's Suffrage Association. Later on, in the early 1900s, women were still campaigning for the right to vote. Not everybody was happy with each other's ideas, though. Carrie Chapman Catt, the former president of NAWSA, and Alice Paul, former member of NAWSA, but now the leader of the NWA, the National Women's Association, disagreed on what methods should be used when it came to protesting and getting women the right to vote. Catt was conservative and quiet, when Paul was considered more radical, where often her protesting would have people arrested. Fast forward to 1920, with a combination of efforts, women had the right to vote.
So, how does this affect us today?
Well, back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, women were treated very poorly. Women were looked down upon and treated unequally. With help from strong women throughout history, such as Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique during the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s, there has been a progression towards equality between men and women, but we are still fighting for it today.
On to the next topic.
The next topic is prohibition, and the 60 seconds begins now.
On January 16, 1919, the ratification of the 18th Amendment took place, stating that in a year from this date, the manufacturing, sale, and transportation of alcohol will be illegal. In the beginning, there were lots of support for this for religious, practical, and moral reasons, but most importantly, because of the war and more efforts to reduce imports into the U.S. But due to the difficulty in policing these rules, it was easy and quite common for the public to access and drink alcohol in places called speakeasies. Prohibition was known to directly influence the rise of gang violence, and gangsters like Al Capone became notorious during this time. Many groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union were known to support the Prohibition movement, but after a while the majority of the American public began to want their alcohol back. Franklin D. Roosevelt used the end of Prohibition to gain support for his run for presidency. The election of the FDR brought the end of the Prohibition era, and 1933 was the final year it was in place. The removal of the 18th Amendment brought back public consumption of alcohol, which is allowed today, but also has influenced things like drinking age.
Amazing! And now, let's move on to the next topic. Conservation! And the 60 seconds begins now.
The conservationists were led by Theodore Roosevelt. Once Teddy Roosevelt became president, he put the conservationist agenda high on the list of things to do in America. Roosevelt created the United States Forest Service, and he created 18 new national monuments. He also established the 150 national forests, as well as 51 bird reserves and 4 game reserves. In 1962, Rachel Carson informed the public with her book Silent Spring about how pesticides like DDT can impact the environment. Fast forward to 1970, Richard Nixon is now president, and he creates the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA takes part in research, education, and environmental assessment. More recently, in 2017, the Trump administration proposed a 31% cut to the EPA's funding, but it was not passed by Congress. Today, the EPA focuses on many things ranging from pesticides to air quality, and from drinking water to radiation.
Sweet! On to our last topic. The last topic is the Red Scare, and your 60 seconds begins now.
The Cold War was an important conflict in American lives in the late 40s and early 50s, but nothing impacted the U.S. people from that war more than the Red Scare, the fear of communism in the United States. Joseph McCarthy claimed that communism ran rampant in Hollywood and politics, creating havoc of the American people and turning families and friends against each other. The conviction of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg added on to the Red Scare as they were both charged with espionage. Due to this tremendous amount of worry, President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 8935, aka the Loyalty Order, which ordered all federal officials and employees to be analyzed and tested for their loyalty. In the late 50s, as the scare began to die down, the public began to recognize that communist spies in the US weren't as common as once thought, and people like Joseph McCarthy who gained attention by claiming the opposite were shunned. The Red Scare is often noted as a good example of how widespread fear can limit liberties and freedoms.
Thanks for watching History in 60 Seconds with Anna and Maya.
Please like and subscribe, but we'll never make it more.
Bye-bye.